very apropos song for this particular series that we're doing. We're doing a series on the death, burial, and resurrection of Yeshua, and just learning some things that perhaps you didn't know. And so we're going to, we only have a couple more lessons in this particular series left, and then we're going to do a series on Psalm 23, The Lord is my shepherd. So excited about that one. Maybe we can get some Psalm 23 songs too. So, we left off on Sunday, I guess it was, about the tomb, and we'd done some talking about the tomb of Jesus, and we found out that there was a wicked person that despised Christianity, and so he built a temple on top of the tomb. And then, of course, when Constantine came into power, Constantine took down all those, I believe it was the temple of Aphrodite. He actually tore that down or took that down, and you would think that was a bad thing, but actually God used it to be a good thing because it wound up preserving the tomb of Jesus. And so then they, of course, built the Holy Sepulchre on top of that, and that's still there even to this day. But after Jesus was buried, we know that that isn't, as Paul Harvey would say, the rest of the story, right? And we're so thankful that it wasn't. And there was a group of devoted women who were among the very first witnesses of the resurrection. So they had the Romans come back and open the tomb up and re-inspect it to make sure he was first there. And then Pilate put his own seal on the tomb. All right, so and of course anyone who would have broke that seal would have faced execution. That was not a cool thing to do. And so here they come back, not knowing that any of this happened, and come back to anoint the body of Jesus. And Jewish custom, actually, culture, required that the body of the deceased actually be anointed with spices and with ointments. And they were prepared by the women in their homes and then carried to the burial site to anoint Jesus' body. And of course, they didn't know, as we said, that the body had been inspected by the religious leaders and the Roman soldiers and legally sealed. The tomb was legally sealed off with the very seal of Pilate himself, no doubt, probably by taking a rope and running it across in front, a tight rope, and then putting a seal on both sides of the rope. And so, of course, nor were they aware that also that we said that there were Roman soldiers that had been posted to actually guard the body of Jesus. So it wasn't enough that they inspected he was there. They inspected that he was dead, all right. They seal off the tomb with Pilate's seal, and then on top of that, they post Roman soldiers in front of the tomb to make sure that no one steals the body. So we might say that they were just a little bit paranoid, wouldn't we? And so what these women, of course, did know was they needed someone to roll away the stone, because this is a very, very heavy stone. And Mark chapter 16, verses 2 and 3 says, and in the very early in the morning, the first day of the week, they came to the sepulchre at the rising of the sun, and they said among themselves, who will roll away the stone from the door of the sepulchre? And when they looked, they saw that the stone was already rolled away, for it was very great. All right, so the morning of Jesus' resurrection, Matthew chapter 28, verse 2 says, and behold, there was a great earthquake, for the angel of the Lord descended from heaven and came and rolled back the stone from the door and sat upon it. Now, first notice here, this particular passage of Scripture, it says that there was a great earthquake, all right? And the word great is actually the Greek word eido, and it actually describes, well, what we would call intense emotion. And it would probably better be translated like, wow, there was a great earthquake, you know. It portrays bewilderment, shock, and amazement, and wonder. And of course, this is no doubt what these women were feeling in that particular moment, at that particular time. So when they saw that the stone was rolled away, they were totally bewildered as to what was going on and what was happening. And of course, second, it said there was a great earthquake, all right? And of course, the word great here is actually the word megas, and it's where we get the word mega, or huge, or massive. So it was a huge, massive, and enormous earthquake, and the word earthquake here is the Greek word seismos, and it actually means this. It means a literal earthquake. So this was a huge, massive earthquake that happened, all right? And of course, it was an earth-shaking event, we might say, that took place on that morning. So next we see that the angel of the Lord was responsible for rolling back the stone from the door. This is one angel. Now remember, angels have lots of strength. They're a lot stronger than you and I am, okay? And so Mark chapter 16, verse 4 adds, it said, and when they looked, they saw that the stone was rolled away, for it was very great. Now the word very here actually means this. It means it was exceedingly, enormously, or extremely great. All right, so this is a very, very big stone. And the word great, of course, again, the word mega, which means huge, massive, or enormous. So the stone that was at the entrance to the tomb was enormous, yet the angel was also likely to be very huge in size. All right. So he rolled this stone away all by himself. All right. And of course, the very first witness to the resurrection of Jesus, even before the women, were the angels. All right. And of course, we've just seen that one came from heaven and rolled away the massive stone that's at the entrance of the tomb. Then after he rolled it away, he sat down upon it. All right. So Matthew chapter 28, verse 3 describes what the angel looked like, and it says this. It says, his countenance was like lightning, and his raiment white as snow. Have you seen one like that lately? If you did, you wouldn't forget it, would you? And so the word countenance here carries or describes external appearance, or what you can see with your very own eyes. All right, and of course the angel's appearance, it says, was like lightning. The word lightning pictures something that was dazzling, shining, or flashing like lightning. So if you've ever been in a good lightning storm before, I think they have the best ones probably in Oklahoma and Texas that I've seen, the best lightning storms, but they can be very blinding. And you've never seen a lightning storm till you go to Texas. But Matthew went on is to say that his raiment was white as snow. All right, so the word raiment here actually describes the clothing, or we might say his outer garment. All right, and of course the angel's clothing was white, and it's the Greek word lukos, and it actually describes something that's light, bright, brilliant, or we might say dazzlingly brilliant. So we could say it this way, being from Minnesota, I can say this and know a little bit what I'm talking about. His raiment was like snow. We get a lot of snow up there, right? And when the sun hits the snow, it can have a blinding effect. You can actually get in a snowstorm and the snow be so bright that you literally can't see the hood ornament on your car. I've been in those kind of snowstorms, driven in them before. Wouldn't recommend it, but it's almost mind-boggling. You don't even know what direction you're going in. It's so bright. And that's exactly what it's saying, the way this angel's clothing was, all right? So it's the picture of sun shining on the snow so brightly that it's actually blinding, all right? And so the angel sitting on the massive entrance stone had a dazzlingly brilliant appearance, and it was so bright, it was like the midday sun reflecting off the snow. and the women could hardly look at him because he was so blinding. And that is very true with snow. If you don't have dark glasses or something like that, and you look into that long enough, you'll actually get snow blinded, all right? Or you can, I knew a kid one time, this reminds me of this when I was in the 9th grade. There was a kid that actually, we were in an FA class, a farming class, and he decided that he would weld without a helmet. And he welded without a helmet, and boy, did he got what's called welder's blindness, because the light is so bright from the light of the welder that will literally blind you and do damage to your eyes from that. And so, meanwhile, as the great earthquake hit and the angel descended and rolled away that enormous stone, the 4 soldiers who were stationed to keep watch were also present at the scene. Now, can you imagine what they thought when they seen that? All right. Upon seeing the angel and his brightly blinding appearance and size, the Bible says in Matthew chapter 28, verse 4, it said, "For fear of him, the keepers did shake and became as dead men." All right, and so it says, for the fear of him, and the word fear here it's actually the Greek word phobos, and it describes what we would call a panic-stricken fear or a terror. You know, it's like someone that would have a fear of spiders or a fear of snakes or something, and all of a sudden you look and there's a big one crawling up your leg, and you freak out. Well, that's a phobos that you have of that. And the men were actually, it said they were having a major panic attack, we could say that, and they literally began to shake. And the word shake here is the Greek word seio, and it means to shake, tremble, quiver, or to shake with fear. Have you ever been so afraid that you literally began to shake? Have you ever been involved in a paranormal experience where it scared the bejeebies out of you and you literally began to shake? All right, so then the Bible said that they became as dead men. And the word dead here is actually, it's taken from the Greek word nekros, and it pictures what we would call a lifeless corpse. They became like lifeless corpses. And these strong, burly, remember, these aren't the wimps. They didn't put the worst soldiers on the case. They put the very best ones on there. They were well-trained military men, but they were paralyzed that night at the sight of this angel. This angel, we might say, literally scared the bejeebies out of them. All right, they fell to the ground under the power of God, no doubt, as if they were dead men. And of course, these soldiers had been through many battles, but they had never seen or experienced anything like this before. Okay? And so eventually they managed to get up from the ground and make their way into the city to report what had happened to the chief priests. It tells us that Matthew 28:11. But not before seeing with their eyes and hearing with their ears the conversation that the angel had with the women at the tomb. All right. Now, there were actually, at this particular occurrence, there was one angel that was sitting on top of the stone, but there were actually more angels than one that were present at the scene. There were actually 4 angels that were present at the scene, all right? Angel number 1, of course, the women stood in amazement and shock and their eyes riveted upon the dazzling, brilliant, strong angel that we just talked about that was sitting on the large entrance stone. And as the guards lay paralyzed on the ground, the angel said to the women, in verse 5 and 6 of chapter 28, they said, "Fear ye not, for I know that you seek Jesus, which was crucified. He is not here, for he is risen, as he said. Come and see the place where the Lord lay." All right, so first notice the angel said, "He is risen." All right, now the word risen here, it actually means this. It means to arouse from death. All right, it doesn't mean you just fall down and you get up. It means literally to arouse from death. And of course, Jesus had been aroused from death. And then the angel said, it said, come see the place where the Lord lay. Now, the word see here actually means to behold, to perceive, to delightfully view, or to take a scrutinizing look. Now, why do you suppose he wanted him to take a scrutinizing look? All right. Well, because he wasn't there. It can also mean to look with intent to examine, to fully view, or to experience, and actually carries the idea of knowing something or acquiring some type of knowledge from personal observation. That's what the angel is telling him to do here, not get secondhand information. He's not risen just because I said he's risen, but I want you to come and look and scrutinize where he lay to come to the conclusion that he's not there. And that's exactly what happened. So when the angel said, come and see, he was saying, if we were to paraphrase, take a good look at this for yourselves and examine the place where Jesus was laid. Scrutinize it carefully. We want you to have a first-hand view, not a second-hand information. So the women accepted the angel's invitation, and guess what they did? They took a look. They looked inside. All right. Now, there was another angel there, angel number 2, was actually sitting where Jesus laid. All right, so Luke chapter 24, verse 3 says that the women entered in and found not the body of the Lord Jesus, and then Mark 5 continues by saying, and entering into the sepulchre, they saw a young man sitting on the right side, clothed in a long white garment, and they were affrighted. And of course, this was another angel, all right? Now, Mark's account reveals that the angel actually appeared to them as a young man, all right? In the word Greek, the word young man actually describes a man who's filled with vigor, energy, and who's in the prime of his life. Kind of like I used to be. And so this word illustrates the vitality, strength, and ever youthful appearance of angels. And so it also says the angel was clothed in a long white garment. All right, and the word clothed here describes a garment that was draped about the shoulders as a mighty warrior or a ruler would be dressed. This is the second angel that's sitting now where Jesus laid. All right, and the garment white, again, is that same word lukos, which, again, brilliant, bright, white. Look into it, it's blinding. That's how bright it is. And finally, we see the word garment here, which is the word stole, and this describes a long flowing robe normally worn by royalty, commanders, kings, and priests, and other elite individuals or those of a high distinction. All right, so when the women saw the second angel, it says that they were affrighted, all right? So the Greek word affrighted here means this. It means they were literally astonished, or we could use the term they were blown away by what they just saw here, all right? So it denotes a mind-boggling experience. I mean, just seeing one of them would probably blow you away, but they just seen two. All right, so the sight of this angel defied their senses and their intellect, and they were actually blown away by what they were experiencing here, okay? And so Luke 24:4 says the women were much perplexed. Now the word perplexed here actually means this. It means to lose one's way. In other words, it pictures someone so confused that they can't figure out where they even are. They can't figure out who this person is or where it is or what they're doing or what's supposed to be happening around them. The person is completely bewildered by the events that are taking place. I'm telling you, when the natural comes into contact with the supernatural, something's got to give, and it's not the supernatural. It's the natural. All right? So we consider all these women had seen since they arrived at the tomb. You can see how perplexed that they could be. All right. Now, Also, there were two other angels, and we'll call them angels 3 and angels 4, and they were actually standing right beside the women. All right? And so the women, it said, in Luke 24:4, it said, and the women stood inside the sepulchre trying to take it all in, and behold, two men stood by them in shining garments. So that's 4 angels. So in that moment, 2 more angels materialized and stood by them, maybe just to hold them up. We don't really know. But the phrase stood by here means to come upon suddenly. Now that could scare the bejeebies out of you as well. To come upon suddenly, to take by surprise, or to burst upon the scene, or to suddenly or unexpectedly appear. So all of a sudden, you see one angel at the door. Well, that kind of freaks you out. He tells you to go examine where Jesus lay. So you go in there and there's another one. So you're about to, you don't really know what you're even doing. You've kind of lost all sense of where you are, and this is like mind-boggling. And now there's 2 more, one on each side of you. Imagine what they experienced that day. Luke 24, verses 5 and 8 says, and as they were afraid and bowed down their faces to the earth, they, the angels, said unto them, why seek ye the living among the dead? He is not here, but he is risen. Remember how he spoke unto you while he was yet in Galilee, saying, the Son of Man must be delivered into the hands of sinful men and be crucified, and the 3rd day rise again. And it says they remembered his words. Now, twice in this passage, the angels hear, he is risen. All right, and the word risen here actually means what? To arouse from death. In other words, he was dead. He was graveyard dead. But the word risen means to what? To arouse from death. All right, so they also reminded the women that Jesus told them that he would rise again. All right, on the 3rd day. And the word rise again here actually means to stand again, or to stand back to life, or to rise from the dead. So Jesus Christ, we could say, had stand again power. Hey, we've got that too. And the same stand again power lives in you and I as well today. All right, so once the angels had declared that to the women that Jesus had risen, they instructed them to go and inform the disciples of the great news of his resurrection. Now, I think that's really interesting. We might touch on this more on Sunday. Now, notice what they didn't say. They didn't say, well, you guys have seen this, but now we know that women aren't supposed to preach to men, so just don't tell anybody that. I mean, only a knucklehead would think that way, right? I mean, the angels had more sense than that. What did they tell them to do? Go back. Go quickly. Matthew chapter 28, verses 7 8 says, and go quickly and tell his disciple that he's risen from the dead. And they departed quickly from the sepulchre with fear and great joy, and they did run to bring his disciples the word. All right. Now, Mark chapter 16, verses 7 and 8 says, but go your way, tell his disciples, and they went quickly and fled from the sepulchre, for they trembled and were amazed. All right. And then lastly, Luke chapter 24, verses 9 through 11 says, and returned from the sepulchre and told all these things unto the 11 and to the rest. Notice women were the first preachers of the gospel in the New Testament. So it was Mary Magdalene and Joanna and Mary the mother of James and the other women that were with them, which told these things unto the apostles, and their words seemed to them as idle tales, and they believed them not. So their first evangelistic meeting wasn't too successful, was it? Nobody believed them. All right. Notice in Luke's account that the news the women shared seemed like idle tales to the disciples. And the word idle tales here actually means nonsense, babble, or something from a state of delirium. So when the women showed up to tell everything that they had seen and heard that day, they were excited and a bit delirious. In other words, I think we'd all be that way if we'd experienced 4 angels, wouldn't you? And you went into a place, you go home tonight, and there's an angel waiting for you by your door. You walk in, there's another one, and you're about ready to have a heart attack, and suddenly 2 more appear right alongside of you. And they tell you to do something. How effective do you think you would be? Probably not too effective, all right? But with their emotions and thoughts that were firing, we could say at full speed in different directions, they probably were not able to communicate to the disciples very effectively that night. All right? So nevertheless, their witnesses did spark a fire in the hearts of the disciples. So Peter and John were so stirred by what they heard that they ran to the tomb to see for themselves what had happened to Jesus. And of course, the women's witness lets us know that we don't need to worry about trying to perfectly present the gospel. We just need to pray and share the best that we can. And guess what? The Holy Spirit will do the rest.